So today we are joined by the 77 times cap for Australia 2015 World Cup finalist, an absolute legend in his own right, Mr. Scott CEO. How does it feel to be on the hottest rugby podcast in the world?
Pleasure to be here, guys. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
No worries, no worries. Honestly, we're very happy to have someone of your stature, come up and talk to us. It means a lot. Thank you very much.
No, it's been good. I've been following you guys now on TikTok for a bit. Your debates are pretty cool. I enjoy it. It sort of brings a bit of thought to everyone's head there, and I thought it'd be nice to get on and have a chat with you guys.
Definitely, definitely. Okay, do you want to take it away, Kev?
So let's take it back to the 2015 World Cup. What was your overall opinion on the World Cup as a whole, and what were your key highlights?
It's taken it back a long way now, really showing my age here. But it was my first experience of a World Cup. Obviously, I didn't really know what I was getting into. Obviously, a couple of the guys in the team had explained what it's like and how it's just a different sort of atmosphere and that. And no, I just thought like what a place to have it. I mean, London, and being able to travel around England was pretty cool for my first sort of taste of it all. I thought England hosted it unbelievably well. Twickenham was always a place that I always wanted to play, as well as I think it was still Millennium back then. So I got the privilege of being able to play in both those stadiums, and also we went to Birmingham as well, where we played against Uruguay at Aston Villa's home ground there. So obviously played there on FIFA a couple of times when I was young, but to sort of be at those stadiums, it was a pretty cool experience.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you guys, I guess misfortune would be the right word. Start off with the pool of death, as they call it, England and Wales, in there. Obviously, an amazing performance. I always remember that last try, that you guys scored in the corner, breaking English hearts. It was just, for me, looking at that tournament, that was one of the highlight games, and then also that Scotland game in the quarterfinal. There was a lot of controversy surrounding it. I just wanted to know sort of what was your opinions about that game, and what was also your opinion on the penalty as well, which is something that's still quite contested a lot today.
Yeah, I guess on our pool, first and foremost, I mean, Wales were pretty red hot at that time. I think they had a bit of Six Nations success in and around that time with Warren Gatland. England obviously being at home for a World Cup, that's all the motivation you need heading into one. And then Fiji at that time were playing a really good style of rugby. And, we had them in the first up game, and I remember coming off that field pretty battered and bruised. I think the scoreline didn't really reflect the contest out there, but I know we had a few guys come off with a few niggles and a few injuries after that game too. So, I mean, every game was pretty tough for us in that pool. So to come out of that on top was, we knew it was going to put us in a good position heading into that finals series. And then yeah, the Scotland game. I mean, I think we still talk about that now. Hodge still brings it up at Exeter as well there. So I think it's a tough one, isn't it? If you're Australian, it was the right decision at the end. But if you're Scottish, it's obviously not. I think it's a tough law, that one. Sometimes it's just like accidental collisions in rugby, isn't there?
Yeah.
I don't think he means to play at the ball. But I guess by the letter of the law at that time, the guy catching the ball is in an offside position. So it's one of those things in rugby where you can argue it either way. And I guess we got the rub of the green on the day, fortunately for us. So yeah, tough one, obviously. But yeah, I mean, I'm not really complaining about the Wallabies player. So yeah.
Moving on to the final game, so the 2015 All Blacks, which has basically been the best team ever. What was it like playing them, and sort of in the build up to the game, how were you talking about playing them or beating them going up to the final?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of pressure heading into that. I mean, packed out Twickenham. I think there was just as many people outside the stadium as there were inside at that time. There as well, New Zealand #1 in the world. So I guess for us, we kind of had to look back at that Sydney test earlier in the year where we did manage to beat them, try and sort of take a blueprint from that game and head into it. But it's tough for World Cup. I mean, you go 7 games on the bounce there in about a 6-week sort of span. It is tough on the body. Physically it is tough to get up. So I guess it's more challenging mentally for you by that time. I don't think you need any motivation. You're in a World Cup final at the end of the day. But I think for us, unfortunately, we just didn't start well. And against that team, obviously, as you've said before, we were littered with rugby greats. You just can't give them the start that they had and sort of try to claw your way back. And and unfortunately, we were playing catch up for a lot of that game, and we just fell short towards the end there. I think Burton Barrett's try really was the sealer for them as a team. So he's quite a talent. I've been playing against Burton now since under 20s and so forth. So if you give guys like Sonny Bill and Martin Arnold and those guys time and space, they'll find these guys. So it's disappointing as it was. We had to be proud of where we got to and the challenge we put up at the end of the day. And and I got to meet Prince Harry, which was pretty cool. He gave us our medals at the end of the game, so I get to tell people I met royalty. So that was a big plus, I guess, at the end of the game.
100%.
What was is there any stories or particular emotions that you felt after that World Cup final? Or was there really a moment where you reflected straight after the game? Is there a bit of an insight to that?
Yeah, it was. I dislocated my elbow against Scotland 2 weeks earlier, and I think in any other sort of calendar year, you probably just go to your rehab and then you come back in whatever 2 to 3 months time. But they asked me if I thought I could play in a World Cup final. Obviously, you're going to say yes, and at the time I did. I felt fine. I was obviously strapped heavily, but I knew sort of what was at stake. But then, unfortunately, I did my medial about sort of 10-15 minutes into the game too. So it's hard. You're running on a sort of adrenaline, and you don't kind of realize it till the end of the game. And losing that game and then going home in an elbow brace and a knee brace wasn't the best thing ever. But I was pretty fortunate that my father came over to watch. He came over from the Wales game, and my brother was playing for Stade Francais, so he came over to watch the England game as well there. So having my dad and my brother there for a lot of the games, obviously my dad during the final series, was pretty special. Family's a big for me, and it's been a big driver of my career over the years too. So I guess to sort of share in that was pretty special, considering he was in the 91 World Cup squad for Samoa. It was kind of a cool experience for us both.
Moving on to sort of more current, so obviously playing Exeter Chiefs now, currently at 6th. Do you think that playoffs is still a possibility and you're going to push for playoffs?
Yeah, I think you have to. There's always a chance at the end of the day. I think for us, the best way we can do that is by winning our last 3 games, really. At the end of the day, you can't really sort of leave it up to fate and say, if these guys beat these guys and if this happens, this happens. You've just, I guess, got to do your best, play your best, win all 3 games, and then sort of see where the chips fall at the end of the day. And finals rugby is a funny beast. Sometimes all your sort of form you take in from during the year, sometimes that occasion kind of gets to you, and if you're not used to being in that arena, it can be a bit overwhelming. So I know a lot of these guys have played a lot of finals rugby, and if we're given a chance there, I think we could ruffle a bit of feathers in that final series.
100%. I think you guys having some of those guys who are missing in the Six Nations would definitely be a much added bonus to your team, and you can really make a charge. I think, yeah,
and that's the plan. I think you just got to get a chance at the end of the day. We've got quite a lot of guys there that have been there and done that, and who do play for their international sides at the end of the day. So we know there's no easy road to winning any competition. We've made it pretty tough for ourselves, but we know it will mean more than anything if we can go all the way. So we still have an opportunity as well in Heineken Cup this weekend against Montpellier. Obviously, you'll go back to back if we win this weekend into a quarter final, potentially against Harlequins and Stormers. So we've got a big job ahead of us on Sunday, first and foremost.
With the playoffs not that far away, and we're seeing you're settling into Exeter quite well. We saw the Exeter way being played against Bath despite the score. We saw your try. Do you want to talk us through that kind of try, and what does it mean to get on the score sheet for Exeter?
Yeah, it's good. It's funny that this is the most tries I've scored in a season, considering I played 11 years in Super Rugby. So, I think it's a combined of 1 meter I've gone to score both tries. So, it's cool. I think it's been one of the big differences I've seen between coming out from Super Rugby to the Prem. It is quite confrontational up here. It's quite physical. You've got to be up for that challenge. There is a heavy focus on set piece as well there. So I think you can't shy away from it up here. I think a lot of your team and I guess fans will look to the tight five to sort of set that tone in terms of physicality. We did fall short, I think, on the weekend, but if we get that right, it helps our team flow and sort of. I guess it is nice to get on the score sheet. The good thing about tries is they don't put on how far you went for it there. So as long as there's no videos and that, everyone might think that I've scored from 90 out or something like that back home.
It's interesting, as like growing up as a fan of rugby in England, there's always been a stereotype about Super Rugby sort of like having weak defense and just all being about all out attack, counter attacks. Would you say that's something that the Premiership needs more of? Because there's always been a stereotype that we play a bit more boring down here, but I think recently we've started to attack in the Premiership and it's been entertaining.
Yeah, I think there's been a huge shift. It's definitely not like that anymore. I think a lot of teams are chancing their arm in counter attack there as well. There is a lot more innovation than what I used to watch back in the day. I guess it's tough, right? Because I only ever grew up with Super Rugby. That's all I ever watched in Australia. We didn't really get to watch a lot of English Prem or French rugby as well, because obviously the time difference didn't really help that either. But having played now almost a full season in the Prem, I can tell you, like, the skill level is definitely it's definitely up there. I think it's hard because weather sort of dictates a lot of how the game is played up here too. We're pretty fortunate down there that for a lot of the season we do have pretty good weather. One of the biggest differences with that too as well is and it's kind of how Rob Baxter explained it to me when I first came, is that Super Rugby is more of a tournament, whereas Prem Rugby is more of a season. It is definitely something I've had to adapt to. Because if you don't play finals, you play all up maybe sort of 10, 12 games in a season, if that. Whereas here, I missed a fair chunk of the start of the season, but I'm sort of hitting around 17, 18 games, and we still got a fair few to go in terms of final and that. So finals and that. So that's been a big adjustment, I guess, for me there as well too, and probably plays to why everyone plays that style there as well up here. You know what I mean? I guess being such a short season, Super Rugby, maybe they tend to chance their arm a bit more because they know they can't afford to lose games.
Yeah.
Whereas here, you can sort of play the long game, build, and then maybe sort of look to play that that style towards the back end of the season when you're maybe chasing a final spot or you've got nothing to lose. So that's probably a big reason why it feels like that as well, and it probably amps up more around finals time.
Yeah,
I think it's quite interesting that we talked about the excitement of the game. I think looking at a team like Exeter, I think you're one of the better teams in the league when it comes to, attendance and really having a fan culture. What do you think, for example, to get that more widespread across the Premiership and to get, I don't know, for rugby to attract a younger audience, guys our age and younger, what do you think the game needs to do here to sort of move towards that direction?
Yeah, I guess I've only been here this season, so I've only got this kind of season to compare it. And I guess comparing to back home, like, the support is unreal here compared, like, rugby's in a pretty tough spot back home, unfortunately. And I mean, to be fair, it's similar in New Zealand. It's not like they're packing out stadiums for every Super Rugby game as well there too, considering it is their number one sport, which always surprised me growing up. Weirdly like that. South Africa are always pretty passionate, but even they at times probably struggle to fill their stadiums until finals time. So in terms of support and that, I think England and France have to be sort of top two in the country. You know what I mean? I guess the UK in general really get behind their teams there as well. That's been one of the biggest things I've really enjoyed is playing at the different stadiums, and like you just had to look at Bath on the weekend, coming last in the comp, but it was a packed out stadium out there. Do you know what I mean? And I think it's something that probably Super Rugby could move towards, moving away from those big rugby stadiums, like heading towards more of those sort of 15 to 20,000 and creating a bit more of an atmosphere in and around games. One of the things, I guess, in terms of the younger audience you were asking about before here, I think player engagement is huge. I think for any audience, like if they have a personal connection to a player, they'll want to go support them, and you know what I mean. So I think getting to know players and getting to know them outside of rugby is important, because there are things that people can resonate and relate to at the end of the day and understand. Oh yeah, he does a lot of the things that I like to do. You know what I mean, and that. So and understand that we are just normal people as well. At the end of the day, we like a lot of the same things that people like that are supporting us there as well. So I think it's hard to sort of relate to a rugby player when all you ever sort of see and hear about them is rugby, there. So I think, sort of things like that, just having fun things in and around that, building that sort of atmosphere, having a DJ at games and all of that will be nice. But, we're pretty fortunate down here at Exeter. We're kind of on our own, really. Like, I mean, I guess Bristol and Bath are pretty close, but they're kind of congested with Gloucester in that little area there. We're in we're in the very affluent area of England up in top, which is pretty fun.
It's quite interesting that you're talking about the stage in South Africa, because the boys and I were having a discussion a few weeks ago when Sharks went to play. Obviously, South African teams are now playing in Europe, and when Sharks went to play Harlequins, I think it was one of the first games of the season. It was, I think, a 70,000 capacity stadium, and there's 2,000 people there, and it doesn't make the best viewing if you're watching a packed stadium with only like half a section filled. So I think what you said about maybe moving to smaller stadiums for those sort of teams would definitely be the best move for them.
Yeah, I think so too, and I think for viewership it's important. Like at the end of the day, you want bums on seats, right? You want people at games. You want, when people are watching games, either through streaming or on TV, you want them to watch games in a packed out stadium. Do you know what I mean? You don't want to have to wait until it's Six Nations or a World Cup to sort of see that. Like if you're seeing that week in, week out, it's exciting for the competition because you kind of hear the atmosphere as well there too. So I think it's super important, and I think it's something that English Prem have got right for a long time, from what I hear. I mean, all the guys that played at Exeter before talked about how passionate the fans are and the packed out stadiums and that. And I understand it has been a lot more packed than it has before, but I guess it is one of the unfortunate consequences of how the competition is at the moment, with the unknown and the uncertainty with the teams. But hopefully in the coming years, you can sort of shore up a lot of those things.
100%.
Yeah, I think with the playoffs, just a couple of weeks to go, I think Bristol are definitely going to be hot on your heels for that playoff position. Is there anything you can really say about Bristol that you compliment Bristol in any way that they could chase your heels? We're from Bristol ourselves. We're Bristol fans, and we like a good chase towards the playoffs. What would you say about Bristol?
I think they play a really exciting brand of rugby. You know what I mean? They chance themselves. I've played against Charles Puto and Stephen Luatua for a long time. We played schoolboys and 20s against each other, and when he gets going, he's pretty red hot, Charles. So I think any way you can inject him in terms of their backline, it's good. I mean, Semi obviously is pretty class at outside centre when he gets a bit more game time under his belt. And then you've obviously got the English incumbents in Genge and Sinclair at tight end and Lucid with is it Thacker at hooker?
Yeah.
I like him. He goes hard on the field. He's pretty exciting guy to watch in and around there. I think, like I said, I think it's anyone's game really. Like between sort of third to seventh at the moment. You know what I mean? Like if you go on a good run there and a few results fall your way, I mean, you know, the top four is a real possibility there. So we know we've got Bristol at home, I think, in a couple of weeks' time. So I'm sure that's going to be a pretty tasty game, eh?
Yeah, I mean, I reckon we'll lose, but well done in advance. Then I reckon is the best.
I see what you're doing there, a bit of reverse psychology.
Who would you say? I know you're talking about Genge and Sinclair. Who would you say are the hardest props in the competition to scrummage against?
Oh, I mean, you know, we had a pretty tough old day against Will Stewart and on the weekend there. So, I mean, I get that's been one of the biggest things that I've enjoyed coming up to Prem, because there is that focus on set piece, and with the sort of talent getting around the Prem as well in terms of that. Like it's not like you can sort of relax one week or the other. You know, you got to be pretty switched on every single game, and there's very rarely a drop off between who starts and who comes off the bench. Sometimes even your bench tight end is a better scrummager, and usually he's probably not on the field because of what he contributes around the park. So by the time he comes on, he's fresh and ready to go, and you know what I mean. You've got to sort of dig in there. So it's been something that I've really enjoyed. I haven't gone up against Sinclair for a couple of years now there as well. So I'm looking forward to that battle there too, heading in. So it's been something I've enjoyed so far, even with the Heineken Cup and all that happening as well too. You know, there's that opportunity to play against the French teams, the Irish, and that too, which is you know, going to be a challenge in itself.
Oh yeah, you go, Kevin.
I was going to move on to current Australia. Obviously they're not considered one of the World Cup contenders at the moment. But where do you see their run of games going, and have they got an easier route going into the final?
Yeah, it's always tough, right? Because I guess when you looked at the initial sort of groupings and that back in 2019, you know, you sort of said either way you go there, it's you know, it's going to be a tough road ahead. But you know, with Six Nations and June series and so forth, the way it's played out is that, you know, a lot of the pretty much four of the top five are on one side of the of the log. So now you can't anticipate that, but I guess at the end of the day, it's sort of the cards you're dealt. You know, Australia still need to win all their games and still need to kick on through anyway. You know what I mean? Whether it's perceived as an easy route or not, if you know, winning is the name of the game there too. You know, and yeah, I think they'll build well. Eddie will bring something new, something fresh. I think the hard thing for teams analysing Australia is they've never analysed Australia with Eddie as the coach for a long time now. So, you know, all that sort of analysis you've done now on the Dave Rennie Wallabies for the last 3 years doesn't really account for too much in terms of game plan, I guess. All you can really fall back on is individual analysis and what sort of each individual brings to the game there as well. So, I mean, World Cups are funny, right? You know, some teams, you know, you sort of count out tend to turn up during their World Cup time, and you know, and so I expect this one to be very similar.
For me personally, on the topic of World Cup, I mean, I think Eddie Hearn's going to be a huge addition for Australia. If you're looking at, I think coaches who can, you know, really bolster a team just purely based off tactical knowledge of the game, then I'll put him, you know, right up there. Do you think his appointment? I know obviously he's not got the longest time. Do you think maybe he could make more of an impact than what David Rennie could have done, or so do you reckon he's the man to lead Australia, you know, to a better result than Rennie could have?
It's a tough question, right? I feel like it's a hard one because from two sort of different viewpoints. I think Rennie was building really well. I think he had finally sort of nailed down the way he wanted to play. Last year was quite unfortunate with injuries, you know what I mean? And it would have been really sort of interesting to see how he would have gone with a fully fit squad ready to play. And then on the flip side there, I mean, if there's someone that's going to be able to do something in a short amount of time, Eddie Jones is that kind of guy. You know what I mean? So I guess we were in a similar position back in 2015 when Michael Checker got appointed pretty late, about halfway through the autumn internationals in 2014, and then sort of had to build his team heading into the 2015 World Cup. So yeah, I don't know if we're trying to recreate some sort of glory there, but Eddie's a very well respected and well renowned coach, and I'm sure he'll get some systems in place there to compete well at the World Cup.
What style of rugby do you think he'll play? Because we spoke to Campese and he said that Eddie Jones has said all sorts of things in the media. One day that he's going to play running rugby, and then the next that the running rugby in Australia is dead, so they'll have to kick to win against teams.
It's all mind games.
Yeah, it's all mind games. You know, Eddie. Eddie likes to sort of, keep everyone guessing and keep everyone on toes and sort of keep what he wants to do. It's a tough one. Eddie's no fool. I mean, at the end of the day, Test match rugby is a whole different style of rugby in itself. Field position, set piece, defence, sort of are the pillars of winning Test match rugby, and then being able to sort of play your attack off the back of that. You know what I mean? Not overplaying your hand, but I think the margin for error is so small in Test match rugby, and teams that are seen as attacking sides, the real difference is they just make the most of their attacking opportunities.
Yeah.
You'll find that they execute a lot more than the teams that don't. You know what I mean? They make teams that are sort of seen as attacking, you may think they have more attacking opportunities. It's not really the case. It's just that they will really hammer it down when they do get the ball. Like New Zealand's transitional play was their real strength for such a long time. Mm-hmm. They very rarely got caught on the hop when they lost the ball, and as soon as they got the ball after a mistake, they were just like bang bang bang, and before you knew it, you were about you'd been marched 40 meters down the field, and they were about 5 meters from your line, and that was the real difference of why they were so good for such a long time. It wasn't the sort of basic skills of kicking and set piece and that really set them apart. It was just that from wherever 15 players are on the field there, they could just make it happen at any point in time, from anywhere there, and they're all pretty aligned on that there. So I think a lot of teams have caught up in that regard. I mean, the French are, you make a mistake against the French, man, they're pretty electric, aren't they, too? And Ireland just find a way to just grind you out, don't they? You know what I mean? Like, they'll just keep going until you make a mistake, and then they just pounce. So I think, Eddie's got to be smart. It's the beauty of rugby. It's very stylistic, right? It's who you come up against, and you got a game plan accordingly. So, I think he just doesn't want to give any secrets away.
Sorry, Kieran, you go. Actually, you go.
If you had to make a really early prediction, I know you're Australian, so it's easy to say Australia. But who do you think is going to go lift the trophy in 6 months' time?
It's a tough one, eh? I think you can't really count out New Zealand, right? Like they've always turned up at and having played against them for so long, I understand that they will turn up. And I do like what the French side are doing at the moment, and I think being at home is going to be huge for them. Everyone always gets a leg up when they play at home. But you got to think the favourites are Ireland at the moment.
Oh yes. Oh yes.
I mean, sorry, South Africa as well. You know what I mean? Like they're the past champions too, so you can't really count them out. They're those kind of guys that what's it called? Where they don't care too much about what happens in the 3 years leading up to the World Cup, but they'll turn up for the World Cup. So, yeah. I mean, those 4 teams are going to be in and around it, if we're honest there. So, it is a tough one, I guess. Ireland have played against France and New Zealand, but we didn't really see how they were going to shape up against South Africa heading into this World Cup. So, if they do cross paths, that'll be a pretty deciding sort of game to see, I guess, one, where Ireland are at, two, in terms of their number one spot, and their favourite tag heading into there, because we all know South Africa love to turn up at World Cup time.
Yeah. So do you not think it's France then? Obviously, with Dupont in his prime, you have players like Penaud in there as well, and it's a home tournament. So surely France have to be favourites.
Yeah. I mean, all four of them are closely behind Australia at the end of the day, but like I said, man, like World Cups are, mate, they're just a different beast there.
Yeah.
Like, it's really about who turns up on the day. I've named four teams there, and you can make a case for why either of those four teams could win the World Cup. So you can't count anyone out really at the end of the day. I mean, Scotland, if you sort of balls bounce their way in that Six Nations, they get a few results go their way, and Warren Gatland, I'm sure, will play Warren ball and grind some teams out if they make their way through. So England are obviously going to fly under the radar now because people are going to sort of count them out, but they're a quality side as well, and they've got a lot of quality players that can make things happen. So like I said, mate, it's anyone's game really this year. This is probably the first World Cup where genuinely there's a lot of teams that could win this World Cup. I think heading into the last sort of 3 or 4, there's sort of been an out-and-out favourite and only a couple teams behind that. But, you've got sort of, 4 or 5 teams that can make a genuine sort of case to why they could win this World Cup and why you could get behind them.
I would agree with your 3. I'll take out Ireland and I'll probably put Australia in there. For me, for Ireland, it's more so I look at them and I don't think they have the bottle. I think New Zealand have the experience. I think South Africa have the experience. Australia, I just think they have star quality and Eddie Jones. But for Ireland, for me, I'm saying if Sexton gets injured or if anything happens to Sexton, their campaign is basically finished. And he's had a few wobbles, injuries the past few games. So I'm not like 100% sure putting my money on them.
Yeah, and he's injured at the moment, I've heard, isn't he? Yeah, so I mean it's tough, right? Because the thing I think that a lot of players underestimate heading into World Cups is the intensity of the games back to back to back.
Mm-hmm.
Travel and so forth, and these sort of things, and that's going to be the real challenge, is how can you keep fronting up, how can you keep your squad humming and healthy, because especially coming out of that pool of death, like we went Fiji, obviously we had that game against Uruguay, but then we went England, Wales, Scotland, Argentina, New Zealand in the final, so like it's hard to sort of keep backing up week in, week out, what I mean? Add in the pressure of winning a World Cup, packed out stadiums, atmosphere at every game, it can, like I said before, get a bit overwhelming. So, for some of these guys, they had that pressure on them in 2019 as well, heading into that World Cup, Ireland, and fell short in the quarterfinals. So, I mean, history tells you they might be in and around it, they may not. So, yeah.
You mentioned Argentina. I think they're definitely a team that could be contenders this year. For the World Cup this year. Especially if you look at their last few games, they've beaten South Africa, Australia, and New Zealand. And then the players that they have as well, they're very strong up front, and they have a really good goal kicker, which is huge at World Cups, especially in those tight games. So I think Argentina could be in the finals.
Yeah, they will. I mean, pretty much every year, the last 3 World Cups, they've been in and around the quarters, or at least the semis too as well there. So, I mean, we play them a lot, and they're a very passionate side. And I think they're like the French. If you give them momentum early, they can really get going and really put on a show there too. So, those kind of sides, the first 20 minutes is crucial about how you front up physically, because I mean, they're quite skillful in that there. So I can't say too many good things about Argentina, because I've got a lot of Argentinian friends, and if they hear this, you know what I mean, they'll probably clip it and send it to me.
Definitely.
A question I wanted to ask, obviously you've played in a various of stadiums. Which is the stadium for you that stood out with being most passionate and the most territorial stadium that you've ever played in?
Um, I think playing for Australia at Twickenham is, you can just feel that air of Australia versus England, when you're heading into the sort of the stadium. I'm a bit biased because Twickenham has always been one of my favourite stadiums outside of Australia.
Yeah.
But I think playing just like playing in the UK in general, like the singing, the atmosphere, like when you play at Scotland and they sing their anthem,
Yeah.
and then they stop the bagpipes. That's one of the coolest things. I think that's my favorite by far. When you hear that, and then obviously Wales at home to Ireland, So I think it's kind of weird. It's supposed to be a hostile environment, but you kind of really admire the sort of the atmosphere and the passion that the fans bring to those games
Yeah.
there as well too. So I think in terms of hostility, Argentina by far have to be, mate, they're up there. They just make you like you're in Argentina, and you definitely know you're the away team. You've got lasers being shot at you before scrums and kicks and people throwing water bottles and stuff. So yeah, they're by far the most hostile out of any crowd.
Going back to the Premiership and Exeter Chiefs, do you think there's any of your teammates that are sort of being ignored by national teams that should be getting a lot more selection than they are currently?
Uh yeah, it's a tough one. I think Jack Noel has really grown back end of the season. I think he obviously had coming back from sort of autumn internationals. He had to sort of find his feet in the way we wanted to play there as well. And I think in the last sort of couple games he's played well. Mate, Ollie Woodburn for me under the high ball, like mate, I played with some guys like Israel Folau was. I've never seen a guy like that under the high ball, but he kind of like I feel safe when Ollie Woodburn's back there. Like, and there's not a lot of players I played with where like obviously there's been guys good on the high ball, but you kind of just know Ollie's always going to get up there and get it. And
Mm.
I think he's been really sort of underrated
Yeah.
in that department because I kind of put him up there top two with Freddie Stewart in the Prem in terms of their aerial prowess there as well. So he's been a kind of cool guy to sort of play alongside. Obviously, you know, Dave Ewers is a bit of a man mountain. So, there were a couple of years back then where I thought he would have played for England as well there too. So, yeah, I'm not. I think for a lot of our boys, they understand that to get picked for your national side, you have to play well for Exeter at the end of the day. So, I think they're just really focusing on that, and sort of leaving it in the coach's hands, and I guess just trying to put their best foot forward.
A lot of media people are speaking about Josh Hodge and how excellent he has been for Exeter. How far would you say he is away from an England call-up?
I mean, he's pretty rapid. He's pretty exciting to watch, isn't he? Especially out in open space. I think this season's been important for him, getting a lot more game time and sort of nailing down that role at fullback at Exeter. It's pretty tough to sort of just put someone straight in an international shirt. I think a lot of guys back home, when I think about it in Australia, have sort of, after a couple of good games in Super Rugby, been put in the Wallabies jersey and then haven't really performed, and then everyone's come down pretty hard on them. So I think having that season or two, establishing yourself in the Prem and gaining that confidence there is super important before you make the step up, because it is a step up at the end of the day. A lot of people don't get told is that, although sort of you've played well at the Prem and that's just what's got you to play for England, you then need to make another step up in that international arena once you're up there again, you know what I mean? Because as I said before, the biggest thing is that the margin of error is so small. So sometimes things you might have got away with, you definitely won't get away with when you're up there. So I think him just refining his skills and gaining that consistency in his game is going to be super important. And I think, if he continues that momentum heading into sort of the next season, I think there's no reason why we couldn't kick on to higher honours.
Yeah. Just the last thing before we wrap it up, we just want to sort of try and build a Premiership backline for the best performers this season? Who makes your backline?
Oh, that's a tough one, eh? Really testing my knowledge here. I like is it Harry Randall at Bristol, the nine?
Randall. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's pretty exciting. I think his link-up play is heavily underrated. I think he when he gets going, he really, the Bristol sort of attack is flowing.
Yeah.
Nine. I think like Leicester before Andre Pollard got there were pretty in doubt. And I think he's really shored up their attack there as well. Carreras at Gloucester has, he's had some glimpses there too. So it's a hard one. I guess I don't know everyone's name. It's hard for me to sort of pinpoint everyone there too. So I guess Marcus Smith and Owen Farrell gave us both a touch up at their home ground, so you couldn't go too far past them. But I kind of like what Andre Pollard's done with Leicester. So I think the way he sort of brought that team back and sort of directed the team around with Ben Youngs has been, I think that's why they're in the position they're in now and why they're a chance of playing finals. So I guess maybe him at 10. Centers is just, mate.
So many.
Tough. I know there's so many quality guys who are just putting their hand up, week in, week out there. It's
Semi Randrandra has to take the 13 shirt, I think, for the season.
Yeah. he's been, when he gets going, mate, he's pretty unstoppable, isn't he? Yeah. There as well. And who's the guy at Bath that plays for England? We just played him on the weekend.
Ollie Lawrence.
Lawrence.
Yeah, I think he's been a pretty standout. And if you got him at 12 and Semi at 13, that's a pretty red hot centre pairing there as well. So and then obviously back three is pretty wide open there, isn't it? So I mean the Arundel for London Irish, he's a pretty exciting guy when he gets on the front foot. So I'm
not
going to give the spot to Ollie Woodburn.
Oh, Ollie Woodburn has to make it.
Yeah, it's I might go.
Hayden Murley as well.
I look pretty bad if I don't put one of the Exeter boys in the team. Because I like what the Newcastle back three are doing. I think they're pretty electric. Those three, mate. They ran us ragged when they played us the last two games there as well too. So I mean, and the Queens boys are pretty rapid too, aren't they? So yeah. There's no real right or wrong answer here, is there? It's really personal preference at the end of the day, isn't it? So I like that Arundel. I think I'm going to go him on one wing, Ollie Woodburn on the other wing, and my fullback.
Pietau.
Yeah, Pietau.
Yeah, Fred Charles. Yeah, Fred Charles in there. I'm good, mate. So he can be a fullback. I mean, that's a pretty exciting backline.
Would you say Pietau's the hardest player to tackle in the tournament, in the Prem? Sorry.
I mean, he's got wicked feet, eh? You know what I mean? He's pretty strong guy. I mean, it's a hard one, right? Because people's take on who's the hardest to tackle is different, right? Like, who's got real good feet, who's just an out-and-out ball runner, at the end of the day. But I do think I'd rather take Manu Tuilangi, full steam ahead rather than trying to defend Marcus Smith with 15 meters one-on-one. You know what I mean?
Yeah. What about
I think it's obviously physically tougher to tackle Manu Tuilangi at the end of the day. Like, I'm not saying it's an easy tackle, but I think I've got more of a chance at a guy running dead straight at me than a guy who's got such good feet and who can run around me. So that's why I think that's where you find a lot of front rowers who'll say those are tougher tackles than the other ones. So, yeah.
What about a Jasper Visa? What's he like? Leicester Tigers number 8.
I mean, he's just a wrecking ball, isn't he?
Yeah.
He just goes all day. Like, he just doesn't stop too. I mean, he's a pretty fit bloke. I mean, they're the tough guys at the end of the day. The guys who just kind of get up and just keep going and just keep going. Um, it's kind of like what when he's fit, Jacques Vermeulen does for us. It's been something we've probably missed the back end of the season, unfortunately due to injury. But he is that kind of guy for us. Sometimes he just kind of gets up off the deck and just keeps going at it. So yeah, those guys are always tough because no matter how many hits you put on them, they're just going to keep fronting up and going again. And he's a big catalyst for their attackers, and he gets them on the front foot first phase and sort of gets their attack flowing. So yeah, we'll have our work cut out for us in a couple of weeks' time against them.
I think the bigger question we all want to know, who's your favorite podcaster out of us guys?
Oh, please.
Oh, you really put me on the spot here, aren't you?
Let them know. Let them know.
See, I think you all bring something, different to the table.
Good answer. Good answer.
Yeah, I think I think it wouldn't be the podcast if you all weren't a part of it. You know what I mean? Because you all bring your own flavor and your own opinion to it, and that's what makes it so exciting. So I think to single someone out wouldn't be fair on any of you.
Yeah.
Good answer.
Yeah.
Done a few interviews in my time. Very political answer though.
Definitely. Thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate you coming to take out your time and speak with us. You're someone we've watched for a really long time, and yeah, we really enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me on, and all the best with it. Going forward, hope it all keeps going well, and you get a lot more guests on here, and you can sort of keep sharing your ideas and thoughts. I think it's good. It's good for the rugby world, and just appreciate you letting me share my story and my time.
Thank you.
No worries. Thank you
Good
very
luck
much.
for the season.
Cheers. Thanks, guys. Take it easy, man.
Thank you.